Greetings and welcome to another episode of Haunted History with Sherry Brake. That's me. In each episode, we're going to venture down the not so straight path of the paranormal, exploring the oddness of life and death, dark history, folklore, hauntings, cryptids, mythology, haunted travel, and the ancient craft. This episode focuses on the haunted history of the Ohio State Reformatory. It was a rainy afternoon back in 1999 when I first laid eyes on it. I peered through the chain link fence like a sugar-deprived kid in a candy store. There it stood, massive and monstrous, as if plucked from the very hills of Transylvania. I felt as if I'd stepped into the movie set of Bram Stoker's Dracula as I glanced at the building. Giant stone walls, foreboding doors, and massive turrets returned my stare. I had heard stories of this fortress, and now I was finally seeing it, albeit from a distance. I did not go inside the building as it was closed that day, but I knew that one day I would be back and I would venture inside its winding hallways. The building I fell in love with that day is the historic Ohio State Reformatory. 1 year later, I returned, and I did so with camera in hand, partaking of a normal daytime tour of the building. The tour guide on that day gave tidbits of history, gruesome stories of past prisoners, and Hollywood movie trivia of films shot on site. It was an informative tour, and being the history lover that I am, I ate up every detail and factoid that I could. Little did I know that in a couple of years I would be back and I would be leading thousands of ghost hunters on investigations throughout this castle-like building. So what draws people to visit the Ohio State Reformatory? It's a compilation of various things, but it basically boils down to these three: the grand architecture, the history, and the ghosts. I asked various tour guides what originally drew them to the reformatory to volunteer. One volunteer guide told me that the building picked her. She did not pick the building. It picked her. That pretty much sums it up. Old buildings tend to have a certain charisma to them, an essence, or a soul that newer construction lacks for the most part. You can see it on the visitors' faces. They could come through that entrance. Eyes are drawn upward to the high ceilings as their hands reach out to touch the varnished woodwork and the carved staircase spindles. It certainly makes an impact on everyone who comes to visit, whether on a daytime history tour or on a nighttime ghost hunt. The Ohio State Reformatory is the largest castle-like structure in Ohio. It is one of the 5 largest in the United States. It occupies more than 250,000 square feet, with its towering stone walls and sprawling footprint. It's listed in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the largest freestanding cell block, which is the East Cell Block, and it stands an impressive 6 stories in all. Of course, these are all just facts, right? But the size and imposing design and the grandeur do not register until you visit for yourself and you see it and you touch those stone walls. When I worked on my book, The Haunted History of the Ohio State Reformatory, I realized that no book could ever give a complete history of that building and also tell of all of the alleged activity and hauntings. My book was just a meager attempt to gather some of the darker, lesser-known history of the Mansfield, Ohio area and the story of its largest and most popular building, the Ohio State Reformatory. So why would a building like the Ohio State Reformatory have paranormal activity? Newcomers to the field of ghost hunting often wonder why. Those of us well versed in the paranormal and accustomed to investigating know exactly why it would harbor entities. Within the walls of this abandoned prison, the restless spirits of its prisoners are said to remain, still confined. It is widely believed among prisoners that if you die in prison, your soul stays in prison. Why would this happen? Could it happen? Would you be a ghost, a spirit, a shadow person, or a glowing orb that someone captures on camera? And boy, don't even get me started there. Entities are said to remain attached to areas or buildings because of various reasons: unfinished jobs, confusion with death, refusal to move on, all rank really high as reasons to stay after the death of one's physical body. Inmates through the years have recalled deplorable conditions: overcrowding, rats, inedible food, unsanitary conditions, and disease. Violence among prisoners was an everyday fact of life. Stories are told of inmates being sliced by shanks or handmade tools, beaten by soap bars, or thrown from six-story walkways above concrete floors and falling to their deaths. One former inmate told me, "I did fine while I did my time there. No problems. I was in for drug charges in the 1980s. They would give me 1 cup of hot water every morning in my cell, and I had a decision to make. Did I want to wash myself off or make coffee with it?" Others who I interviewed called it a smelly hellhole, Dracula's castle, and hell on earth. Opinions from past inmates vary on the reformatory, yet they all had a common thread: they could not wait to be released. Most paranormal researchers and those into hunting ghosts know that historical locations can have ghosts and be active in the paranormal sense. Many historical buildings, because of their age, have had more time to have spirits attached to them. Museums, hotels, taverns, churches, schools, antique shops, hospitals, theaters, and prisons all would qualify. All of these locations have a high amount of traffic coming through their doors. Ghosts and spirit activity can be attached to the building, the property, or even to the people inside. The Reformatory housed criminals for 94 years. These criminals committed offenses ranging from early horse thievery, arson, robbery, drug trafficking, and even to violent crimes such as murder and rape. Over 1,500 inmates came through the gates. More than 200 murders are known to have taken place inside the reformatory. Think of how many occurred that did not make the record. Add to these incidents the intense feelings and emotions the prisoners must have experienced in their stay: regret, fear, anger, sadness, desperation, revenge, and hopelessness. These emotions can sometimes hang in the environment, almost like an emotional blanket on the atmosphere. Many people experiencing the heavy and hard to breathe feeling as they step inside some of the cells and other areas inside the over 250,000 square foot building. Thousands of people investigate the reformatory on a yearly basis, and many have had experiences that they cannot explain. To many, the words ghost and spirit are interchangeable. Most paranormal investigators and psychic will tell you that they are two separate things. According to Webster's dictionary, a ghost is the, quote, seat of life or intelligence or a disembodied soul, the soul of a dead person believed to be an inhabitant of the unseen world or to appear to the living in bodily likeness, end quote. A spirit is defined as, quote, a supernatural being or essence, end quote. So, are you confused yet? To put it into simple terms, ghosts are stuck between dimensions. The term ghost is the most popular and common word of choice when we speak of hauntings and the paranormal. In its archaic meaning, it refers to the animus or the disembodied soul. Virtually all cultures believe in the afterlife, or the ability of ghosts of the dead to return and inhabit the world of the living. One religion that does not believe that a spiritual aspect of the human body survives is classical Buddhism. Protestants generally believe that the dead can never return and that ghosts are evil and diabolical entities masquerading as the dead. Followers of spiritualism believe that ghosts are souls of the dead trapped on earth because they do not realize they are dead or are confused. Followers of Catholicism acknowledge that souls in purgatory might return as phantasmal, but not solid, ghosts to ask for prayers from the living. In the West, souls are supposed to depart and rest eternally with God in heaven or with Satan in hell. The Chinese believe in at least two or possibly three aspects of the soul that can account for the dead making their presence known in more than one location. Adherents to the Church of the Latter-day Saints believe that after we die, the spirit leaves the body and moves on to the spirit world to continue learning and to prepare for the second coming. They believe that the ancestors become angels, not saints, and can be seen by people of this earth under certain conditions. Native American Indian beliefs are different among the various tribes. In general, Native religions have no precise belief about life after death. Some believe in reincarnation, with a person being reborn either as a human or an animal after death. Others believe that humans return as ghosts or that people go on to another world. Others believe that nothing definitely could be known about one's fate after this life. No matter what religion or culture, or how you slice the paranormal bread, it all comes down to one common ingredient. According to most religions, there is something that exists after you leave this earthly realm. On the subject of spirits, they seem to have a much softer and pleasanter place in the paranormal world. Spirits are said to have crossed over and are at peace. They can come and go, visit us, guide us, and help us learn, but they do not haunt, according to many psychic and medium opinions on this subject. So, spirit has been defined as the vital principle or animating force within a living being. Other definitions include a supernatural being inhabiting a particular place, object, or natural phenomena. Incorporeal consciousness is another definition of spirit. All in all, after interviewing hundreds of people on the subject, they all come to one important conclusion: ghosts haunt and spirits do not. I want to touch a little bit on shadow people as well, because shadow people have been seen throughout all of the Ohio State Reformatory and for many, many years. So shadow people are quite unique. People have been seeing these entities for quite a long time. In deep Appalachia, they were sometimes called porch people or shadow folk. These entities almost always used to be seen out of the corner of the eye and only very briefly. But more and more it seems that people are beginning to see them straight on and for longer periods of time. Some people testify that they have even seen eyes, usually glowing red, on these shadow beings, kind of like Mothman. Shadow people are somewhat different than most ghost phenomena. Ghost apparitions are almost always a misty white, vaporous, or have a decidedly human form and appearance. Shadow beings are much darker and more shadow-like. In general, although, the shadow people often do have a human outline or a shape, but because they are dark, the details of their appearance are somewhat lacking. This is in contrast to many ghost sightings in which the witness can describe the ghost's facial features, style of clothing, and other details. There are some theories that shadow people could be interdimensional, kind of like a time traveler. These shadow people are the most benign, usually not taking notice of those who observe them. There are other theories out there in the paranormal community that suggest these are creatures that exist on a separate plane of existence that occasionally overlaps with ours. Others believe that shadow people are related to gray aliens or the reptilian humanoids found in conspiracy beliefs, such as those promoted by David Icke. So let's talk about the shadow people inside of the Ohio State Reformatory. Shadow people have been spotted at various times of the day, lurking about the halls and cells of the reformatory. Shadows have been captured on video and also on cameras in areas such as solitary confinement, the warden's living quarters, the chapel, and the room known as the toilet room. Yes, you heard that right, the toilet room. A woman's shape has been seen in the administrative area several times. She has been seen spotted moving up and down the staircase very quickly, almost fleeting. The south side of the east cell block seems to be another location of interest for those paranormal investigators seeking out shadow people. They are evasive and a bit elusive to see, and most of the time, the image is there for only a few seconds before dissipating quickly. I remember one of the volunteers at the Ohio State Reformatory told me years ago about an experience that he had had with shadow people. And I remember him saying that the most amazing thing to him was seeing the shadow man, that the shadow man seemed to hang out in the commissary in the east side shower room. He had seen him come out of a cell and walk up the stairs towards the infirmary, and he's even seen him in broad daylight. Another person that I interviewed was Jared, who was a tour pusher and a maintenance volunteer at the Reformatory, where he began volunteering in May of 2009. His account of the shadow person was very interesting. These are in his words. On our first night volunteering for a ghost walk, we heard loud footsteps at the far end of the east cell block, and upon turning on the flashlight, we discovered that no one was there. In the west cell block, I had the whole left side of my body get so cold it started turning numb. In the west administration, I saw a shadow figure move rapidly up the stairs to the third floor. We've also captured numerous EVPs, including profanity, whistling, and random voices. I have also heard the cell doors slamming closed when in fact they don't move at all. And how eerie is that? So, can ghosts and spirits be around us at any time? The answer to that is yes. But to those of us who are not gifted in the ways of mediums and psychics, we usually prefer to use investigative equipment to explore the world of ghosts and spirits. So, tour guides and volunteers of the Reformatory are often asked, what is the most paranormally active area in the building? Areas that are often mentioned would be solitary confinement, the showers, yeah, you heard me right, the showers, the warden's quarters, the administration area, the chapel area, and various cell blocks. Basically, the whole crazy building. So opinions vary among paranormal investigators as to what and where the most activity prevails, and it also seems to change from day to day. There have been occasions when odd occurrences have happened while the sun is still shining, and nothing has happened on a full moon ghost hunt. You cannot put the world of the paranormal on a time schedule. It will happen when and if the time is right. So, what exactly has been cited at the Ohio State Reformatory, paranormally speaking? Black masses, shadowy figures, white mists, full-fledged apparitions, figures darting in and out of the cells, glowing balls of light, Fleeting objects darting down hallways, and misty apparitions, both female and male. What has been felt at the reformatory? Cold spots, eerie sensations of being watched, fingers touching you, hair being played with, pulled, or stroked, and although rare, even more frightening is the slaps, the shoves, and the scratches. Paranormal experiences can also include the olfactory senses, smells. Smells are associated with certain areas of the reformatory. Pipe smoke or cigar smoke has been experienced in the administration area and in the warden's quarters. Smoking is off limits inside the building, of course, but the smell of rose water or rose-scented perfume in a bathroom and living area of the warden's quarters ranks high on the list of scents experienced. Some psychics who have strolled down through solitary confinement have said that they have even smelled the smell of death. Many paranormal organizations and ghost hunting groups have visited the Ohio State Reformatory from all over the world. Now, Justin and Joey are part of the Northeastern Ohio Paranormal Investigation Center, and they investigated the Ohio State Reformatory back in 2009 twice. Neither one of them is a psychic or sensitive, but I want to read to you their story. Justin says, on our first trip to the Ohio State Reformatory in August of 2009, most of the EVPs that we collected in the personal experiences took place in the warden's quarters. While we were walking down the hall investigating, I suddenly had a strange feeling that someone or something had touched my arm. At first, I thought it might have been a breeze blowing through the building, but after further investigation, we found that there were no windows open, and on that particular night, the air outside was still. Another strange incident was the moving pane of glass on the landing of the stairs. Joey was walking ahead of me, and as he passed by a window, the glass had moved and made a clunk sound. I asked him if he touched it, and he said no. I reached out and touched it, and it was loose in the wood frame. There was no way that he could have stirred up enough air to make it move by walking past it. That pane of glass has to be a 1/4 inch thick, and again, the air outside was still. That night, we only picked up 2 EVPs. A man's voice, which was what I consider a Class B EVP, said, "You shouldn't be here," which was recorded in the warden's quarters. And later that evening in the kitchen upstairs, we asked if anyone was here, and a woman's voice, or what we think sounded like a woman, said, "I'm here." This is Justin talking about his second investigation in 2009. Our second trip took place in November 2009. On this trip, we brought along my sister Allison, who is also interested in the paranormal. This trip, we had very few personal experiences other than some unexplained EMF readings in the bullpen around the large pillars, but we collected far more EVPs than we did the first trip. One of the most bizarre EVPs we caught took place in the bullpen while we were looking at and photographing the tunnels that were used in the Shawshank Redemption movie. The only way I can describe it is a wild laugh, but no one in the group remembered hearing that laugh. Another EVP was recorded in the library. We were looking at some strange metal box with a glass door on it. Joey had asked me if they had pets, and I replied, I have no clue what that was used for. The EVP we recorded said, "Boots." The library that evening seemed to contain some activity. Joey and myself were standing at the counter looking at some of the books and papers, not saying anything. Once we started talking, we recorded a very gruff voice that said, "Shut up," as if the individual was a very heavy smoker. The West Cell Block provided us with one of the clearest EVPs that I have ever recorded. A voice said, "Lights out," after we had asked if anyone wanted us to leave. The most paranormal event that took place that will always stand out in my mind is when I felt that someone had touched my arm in the warden's quarters on August the 8th, 2009, while on the haunted overnight stay with Sherry and Haunted Heartland tours. The Ohio State Reformatory is full of interesting history. The overall construction is fascinating. I believe most people visit the facility not only for the paranormal experience, but to experience some of Ohio's history and perhaps some of the mystery as well. Justin and Joey's experience is just one of thousands that people have experienced. Occasionally, something unusual is captured that does not seem to be related to inmates or guards from beyond. Mark Carter, a member of the Ohio Paranormal Organization, had a pretty good night exploring the reformatory. He caught several EVPs that said his name, mostly in solitary confinement. And boy, let me tell you what, on a personal note, solitary confinement, one of my favorite places to investigate. So, another visitor claims to have seen an apparition of a man in a Civil War uniform pacing about at ground level near one of the cell blocks. Remember what I told you earlier, that on the grounds that the Ohio State Reformatory was built on, it was a Civil War training camp for Union soldiers. So this visitor said that it seemed as if this soldier was pacing back and forth and was on guard duty. Paranormal groups and solo investigators flock by the thousands to investigate the premises of this prison. One such investigator and leader is Brian Fain. Brian was the founder of the Massillon Ghost Hunters Society in Stark County, Ohio. Brian and his wife, Lena, both good friends of mine, founded the group on September the 1st, 2004, and are both believers in the paranormal. Brian has had a long interest in the paranormal and investigated the reformatory in 2008 for the very first time. This is a recounting of the evening's activity and Brian's words. During our last investigation on September 5th, 2009, Lena, Christine, Garen, and I were in the basement. After looking around, taking photographs, and recording for EVPs for a bit, we were standing just down the stairs leading to the main floor. The four of us were talking about where to go next. During our conversation, we heard out loud a disembodied voice that said, "Hello." We paused and said hello back and asked if anyone was down there with us. No one answered back. Brian adds that upon reviewing the evidence of that night's investigation, the sound was captured on their recorder. And how cool is that? I love sharing these personal experiences with you, and I have another one here from Becky, who was a volunteer and tour guide who began her adventure with the Reformatory back in 2000. When asked what drew her to the Reformatory, her reply to me was, "I love the history and the architecture of the building. I worked in the museum field for 15 years before becoming a teacher, and I also love talking to people, so being a tour guide and an investigator allows me to indulge my love of history and talking and interacting with people from a variety of backgrounds." When I asked Becky what areas of the Reformatory she thought were the most active, she mentioned the East Shower Room, East and West Administrative, East Wing and West Wing, and the Old Barber Shop. She had been experiencing a few oddities while leading tours and volunteering. Becky told me that she had heard a laugh in the middle hall of the second floor warden's quarters. No explanation except there was something there that she couldn't see. She was also touched on the second tier of West Cell Block, cobwebbed in the TB ward, and she had seen shadow figures as well. So the cobwebbing in the tuberculosis ward was overwhelming when it happened, and the smell of Helen's perfume, the wife of Reformatory Superintendent Arthur Glatke, up on the third floor of the warden's quarters was very vivid and unexpected. She did tell me that she does believe in the paranormal, or at least those things that happen that can't always be explained. She told me of an inmate who had hung himself in solitary confinement with the white cotton jumpsuit he was issued as a solitary confinement attire. After that incident happened, inmates in solitary were issued shorts. A former inmate also had related to Becky another incident that is part of the solitary confinement history. A large man and a smaller man were sharing a cell. Now, my first question is, why would two people share a solitary cell? But remember, there was overcrowding back in the days of the Reformatory. So the basic meal consisted of slices of bread and a bowl of soup for 2 days. On the third day, the inmates received a regular meal. The average time spent in solitary confinement was 10 days. The story that Becky told me says that the larger man took the smaller man's food. The smaller man somehow got possession of a shank and slit the big guy's throat and killed him. When the guards did the head count later, they found the missing larger man shoved under the bunk where he had been stuffed by his cellmate. One version of the story says that the little guy didn't walk out either after the guards were done with him. Unfortunately, there were inmates that decided to take their lives inside the prison. Some of them decided to hang themselves. In the West Wing showers, there is a bent overhead pipe where another prisoner hung himself. Inmates in the past have gotten desperate and a bit creative when it comes to hurting themselves, either for medical attention or for taking their own lives. It has been told to me that 4 or 5 prisoners caught themselves on fire in the general population cells through the years. One such event took place on the 4th tier east cell block, in the 4th cell from the end and on the north side. This is the end that faces towards the central guard room. This is an area of reported paranormal activity. We can only imagine the desperation that went through these men's minds. Being locked up for so long, being in solitary confinement, worried about your loved ones on the outside. You think of the energy that is left behind on the atmosphere. These men and young boys in the early days, imagine what was going through their mind. The energy from those thoughts, the hate, the anger, the fear, the prayers that were uttered in those cells for redemption. This stuff gets left behind on the atmosphere. And most of you, probably listening to this, have investigated before. And there's times when you walk through the hallways at the Reformatory where things are pretty quiet. You don't feel too much. You hope for something to happen. You hope for some paranormal activity. And then you're drawn towards a cell and you step inside that cell. And it's inside that dark cell that you can feel. It's almost palpable at times. You can feel that sadness or that anger. And, I think that's what keeps us going back as investigators, is we already believe. We don't need any proof. We believe that there's some type of an existence or an afterlife or the essence of the soul that can hang out, can haunt an area per se. But man, this place has it all. I seriously hope that if you've not been there yet, I hope that you get a chance to go to Mansfield, Ohio, and explore the hallways and the cells of the Reformatory. In writing and researching my book, The Ohio State Reformatory, The Haunted History, I had the chance to investigate, multiple times before I even wrote this book. But I also had the chance to interview hundreds of people, ghost hunters, staff, tour guides, volunteers. And this is one story from a woman who managed the Reformatory back in 2006. She was operations assistant at the time. Her name was Susan. And in interviewing her for my book, she had told me that she had lived in Mansfield her entire life and that she had always been fascinated by the Reformatory and its history. She said that she was a believer in the paranormal, and she also truly believed that the Reformatory was an active location. I had asked her what areas seemed to be most active for her, and she told me that all areas have had some kind of activity, even in the main hallways. She told me that she had heard footsteps down the main hallway, she had heard a female voice calling down the hall, and she had seen 2 apparitions in the East Cell Block. In 2008, during a ghost walk, she saw an apparition on the 2nd tier of the East Cell Block. Susan had told me back then, when I interviewed her for the book in 2009, that over 14,000 people had come to the Reformatory for group and public tours in 2009, with an estimate of approximately 40,000 fright-seeking visitors attending the haunted prison that was held every October on site. So imagine, let's talk about that fact. Here you have a location that definitely has paranormal activity. And now, in the month of October, you have a haunted house, the haunted prison experience. Think of all of that energy of people visiting, the thousands and thousands of people that come to a haunted house, screaming, yelling, the fear, all of that energy on top of it being a haunted location and an active location. Can you even imagine? I have one last experience that I'd like to share with you, and this is of a woman who I have known since 2003. We met in Northeast Ohio, and her name is Laura Lynn. Now, Laura is a truly gifted psychic medium and an angel reader, and we have worked often together in our paranormal professions and doing investigations, doing events together. And she's truly special. She possesses a sincere desire to help and connect with people, in the plane with those that have passed on. So she's honest and kind and just truly a bright light to many people that are seeking answers about past life questions, about current situations. She's truly got the gift to converse with those on the other side. So when I interviewed her for my book back in 2009, this is what she told me. I believe many places in OSR are haunted. The toilet room and all cell blocks carry precarious energies. In the fall of 2007, I was on a ghost hunt adventure with Ohio RIP, a paranormal group I belonged to at the time. During the evening, Tina, one of the staffers at OSR, brought me into the toilet room. She knew that I was a psychic medium, and she wanted my impression on an entity that seemed to bother women. I was surprised to find the entity quickly when entering up a little stairwell on the back end of the toilet room. This entity was a large, very unkempt-looking male, approximately 35 years old. He was very angry and screamed obscene names at me and gave very rude gestures. I tried to reason with this entity, but he instructed me, "We will do battle if you do not get the fuck out of here." I left kind of shakily and went down the cement steps. My hands were wet from anxiety, and my knees wobbled all the way down the darkened stairwell. When I re-entered the office area, another volunteer wanted me to show him where all of this took place. Several of the team members followed suit into the toilet room. I admit I was a little cocky and ignored the warning the entity provided earlier. I allowed my ego to get in the way, something I am usually very careful not to do. When re-entering the toilet room, I had no flashlight. Rule number 1 for ghost hunters to follow, I know. So since I had no flashlight, I could not see the fence I was walking into. I rechecked my footing, stumbled a little bit, and at that time, I felt a strong pressure in my back. I thought someone was falling on me, but at that moment, I was violently shoved. I broke porcelain with my fall and became bloodied on my hands and legs. I got up off the broken porcelain bits and immediately proceeded to the back stairwell, yelling at the entity to come out and show yourself. I made quite a spectacle of myself in front of many witnesses that night. When I got into the light, I could not believe that my jeans were ripped, and I still bear the scar from that evening on my knee. I am now more careful than ever not to allow my ego to get in the way. I enjoy these paranormal investigations. However, I look at them a little differently than I once did. I have witnessed thousands of ghosts over the years, even seeing them on a daily basis. I have never had an experience such as this one, and I intend never to again. Various paranormal-themed television shows have been filmed at the Ohio State Reformatory over the last couple of decades since the building has been closed. Among these have been TAP's Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Travel Channel's 100 Things to Do Before You Die, and Most Terrifying Places in America, which aired back in 2008 originally. And I had the pleasure of working on that show as well. It was a lot of fun to do. I have to say that we filmed for about 10 hours that day at the Reformatory, and probably the most frightening thing that happened during the entire filming was the fact that at the very end of the night, the film crew walked into a cell, and there was a very angry raccoon in the corner of that cell that came raging towards one of the crew members. So that was pretty exciting for him. I don't think he'll ever forget his experience in the Reformatory. So there have been a multitude of television shows filmed there. There have been music videos. Probably the two most famous would be Lil Wayne's Go DJ and Godsmack's Awake. Major motion pictures have been filmed at OSR. Air Force One, Tango and Cash, Harry and Walter Go to New York. More lately, there has been some Sylvester Stallone movies filmed, and probably the most famous is the ever-popular Shawshank Redemption. So the Mansfield Reformatory Preservation Society, they have made great strides with the renovation of this building and the repairs of this building. Super expensive. So they formed back in 1992. They have put a new roof on this building. They have put in new windows. My goodness, they have done so much work. The renovations have taken place everywhere throughout the building, and there is a wonderful museum area that features the Ohio Electric Chair, which I will do another episode on here in the future. Now, if you're curious about this building, this castle-like structure, I encourage you to watch for my second part of this episode that will be released in November, I believe. So, with the history of the Ohio State Reformatory, it's basically still being made, and it will continue throughout many more years. Thousands of visitors will continue to flock to this castle and venture inside. They will continue reveling at the ornate woodwork, the solid marble pillars of the central guard room, and the 6-story freestanding cell block. History lovers and paranormal investigators alike will continue to come and visit. And what of the shadowy forms that lurk inside? As Edgar Allan Poe once said, the boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one begins and where the other shall end? I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Haunted History with me, Sherry Brake. If you're interested in my events, programs, ghost tours, international tours to Ireland and Scotland and beyond, please check out my website at hauntedhistory.net. I have truly enjoyed sharing with you my insight, my stories, and my love of this crazy, dark, twisted, and intriguing subject we call haunted history. As I've said in the past, ghost stories don't need to be made up. History is frightening enough. Don't you agree? Until we meet again.